welcome back to another episode of Paradigm Shift TV 314. And man, as always, we got another good show for y'all tonight. I got both Christian brothers, Richie Garfield and Negedi Hawkins, in the building. Now, we know that a lot of y'all follow the dialogue and discussion with Richie Garfield and Chris Harris. And on the back end of that video is what we're going to be talking about today. We're just going to be talking about the Exodus and, timelines and, archaeology and people and places and all that, man. And hopefully, while y'all watching these two brothers who are, who I know, they know way more than me about the Exodus and just the whole Old Testament in general. I'm more of a New Testament type of brother, as most of y'all already know, but I'm happy to have two of my brothers who I look up to on this particular topic to be in the building today to give their point of views about this. And I know that y'all are definitely going to learn something tonight. If you're a Christian, you're probably going to see information that you probably haven't seen before to help you come to a conclusion. If you are a non-believer, I'm pretty sure you're going to see some information from the Christian side that would help you to update your arguments, because we tired of the old arguments, man. I'm just saying it like that. But without any further ado, man, we're not going to hold y'all up anymore, man. My brother Negedi is going to kick off this topic. And Negedi, my brother, the floor is yours. Richie Garfield, you can jump in whenever you want. Y'all can share, compare notes, and let's get this discussion started, my brother. How you doing today, Negedi?
I'm doing good. I'm here at work, so just forgive me if I'm like in and out.
Okay.
Actually, yeah. So I asked. I know I had talked to you, brother Jacobus, to holler at what's his name, Chris, to see if he wanted to actually do a debate on this subject, because
he ran from you, bro. He ran from you. I'm saying that.
I ain't saying it. I'm not gonna say it, but
I know you're not saying it. I'm saying it. But go. I'm saying my views is not expressed by Negedi or any other person out there.
Yeah, I kind of feel like if we would have had that debate, he would have seen that it would have been like a real eye opener. But I'm sorry that we can't do this debate with him. So just decided to move on and talk with Brother Garfield about some of the information that I've learned, and we've talked briefly today to go over some of the conclusions, the conclusions or the things or the information that brought us to our own conclusions on the Exodus matter. And so, not to waste any more time, I am going to share my screen, and just let me know if you can see it.
Yes, sir. Your screen is sure.
Okay, so I just put this thing together real quick, and basically, like, for me, I'm not good at like reading from something and extrapolating exactly what I've written. So I just got pictures to follow my path in research. So as you can see here, I just called this the Exodus Basic Research for an Archaeological Footprint Part 1. And the reason why it's called Part 1 is because there's so much information that goes with this. So actually, before I get started, can I get 1 minute, 1 minute real quick to, I need to address something with a teammate here real quick. Can I do that?
Okay. Oh, yes, sir. Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Okay. While we waiting on Brother Negedi, I just want to say, how you doing, Richie Garfield? How you doing today, my brother?
Brother, it is here with the family life, work life, and the God life, first and foremost,
Right. So all three of them things you said sound like the same things that I'd be involved with.
Yeah, man. You know how it is, man.
While we waiting on Negedi, you just want to say a little bit about what you gonna present, or your side of everything?
I mean, both of us, both our goal is to show the audience is that the Exodus is a historical event, that the biblical account is reliable, and you will find archaeological evidence of the Israelites, of the Exodus, of everything the Bible says in Egypt, and you will see that tonight from both sides.
Roger that. Roger that. I'm sorry. All right, so I'm gonna grab this screen again. All right, can you see this?
Yes, sir. We can't see it. Yes, sir.
Okay. Once again, I do apologize. But yeah, brother Garfield, you're right. We will see some form of an archaeological footprint for the Exodus. And actually, what you see here, this is like just an example of the things that I've came across, some of the theories that I've placed away in my notes. What you see here is a picture of Sobek Neferu. And later in my studies, I had come to, I guess you can say, a theory that she may have been the princess or the Pharaoh's daughter who may have rescued Moses out of the Nile. But that's neither here nor there. I'm just giving you an example. But in any case, let's see. So we got the Bible and Hollywood, and what you see here, I'm sure everybody is familiar with the Ten Commandments, the movie. And in this movie, you would see Moses going up against Ramses the second, or Ramses the Great. And as a child, every Passover or every Easter, every year, we all sit down and look at this movie, and the graphics was great. The acting was great. Everything was great about this movie. But the issue for me with this movie, and I didn't know at the time, is that when it came to the characters in the Bible, like Ramses, for some reason, I couldn't find any archaeological evidence tying Moses or the Exodus or slavery during the time of Ramses II. And I basically just pulled information from Wikipedia just to give a basic background of who this person is. So Ramses II was the third pharaoh of the 19th dynasty of Egypt. He is often regarded as the greatest, most celebrated, most powerful pharaoh of the New Kingdom itself and the most powerful period of ancient Egypt. And the name Ramses is pronounced variously. So, like I said, growing up, and I've been reading the Bible since I was 6 years old. And my grandmother and my mother, they was the ones who told me, hey, when you sit down, you read this Bible, you need to make sure that you pray to God for understanding and just don't jump in it. And that's how I got started early in my Bible studies. Nevertheless, or however, being so, I guess, in awe of watching that movie, The Ten Commandments, I was like, man, maybe I'm gonna go and do some research and see if I can find out who this Ramses person was. And so back in the day, I think this was like in the early 80s, there's this thing called a book. So, and it was a special kind of book, and it's called the Encyclopedia Britannica. Nowadays, you could just jump on the internet and just find anything you want. Back in the day, you had to go and get a book and sit down and read page after page after page.
True.
So when I went and did the research on Ramesses, it stated, everything that's listed here, but there was a particular part in the Britannica that said, most Egyptologists doubt that he was the pharaoh of the Exodus. And I'm like, well, okay, something ain't right here, because the Bible is stating that this happened. The Bible was also pulled up of Pyre Ramses, the cities of Ramses being built. And this is all mentioned in the book of Exodus. So I'm saying, why is it that the encyclopedia is saying that he possibly cannot be the pharaoh of the Exodus? So as me as a Christian, I always look at it like this. The Bible is always right. Man, however, he can get things wrong all the time. So looking at the possibilities of Ramses being the pharaoh, I had to reject it because looking up information about slaves during the 19th dynasty, I couldn't find any encounters between him and a Semite named Moses and all this. I could not find this beef that they had with over Nefertiti. I could not find, because all these things were in the movie, the Ten Commandments, but the archaeological record didn't match with what the movie said. So I said, okay, after I had rejected this notion, I was like, well, let me go back and read what the scriptures say. And lo and behold, when we go and look at what the scriptures say and what the movie was telling us, it's completely different. There was so many things in the movie that I didn't read in the scriptures, and the whole narrative was completely different. So Ramses II, for me, I rejected him as the pharaoh of the Exodus just based off the fact that I could not find any archaeological evidence to tie him to the Exodus. So here's another person that I said, okay, well, maybe Thutmose IV is the pharaoh of the Exodus. And the only reason I use Thutmose IV is because he had that last part right here. I don't know if you can see it, but right here at the end of his name, Thutmose. So I was like, could he possibly be? But again, I didn't see any archaeological evidence tying him to the biblical Moses or to the Exodus. The one thing that got me, however, though, if you can see here, it says 14th century BC. So there is a biblical timeline that I could show you later on that I go by. But the thing is, looking at the biblical timeline and the conventional timeline for Egypt, placing this man in the 14th century, that would have been a syncretism if the archaeological record or footprint matched up with what the Bible says. What I do know is that the Bible places the Exodus in and around between 1487 BC and 1447 BC. With those variables, I'm comfortable with. But when we start talking about at least 100 to 200 and even 300 years where there is doubt, I can't deal with that. But like I said, with the 14th century BC on the conventional scale, although it places him within the time frame of the Exodus, there is no archaeological evidence for Thutmose IV. And this is just my research over the years of who I was trying to fit in there that would make sense as to who was the pharaoh. Then I'm so confused because I'm like, we got all this information, but something's not lining up. So who you see here is Menento. So Menento is believed to have been an Egyptian priest from I can't even say the word, but who lived in the Ptolemaic kingdom in the early 3rd century BC during the Hellenistic period. He authored Egypticus in Greek and major chronological source for the reigns of the kings of ancient Egypt. So the reason why I posted him up here is due to the fact that his work was used to help fill in the gaps as far as the Egyptian chronology is concerned, because he, according to some sources, he had direct access to the ancient records of Egypt, like the King's List. This King's List, this Turin King's List, was created during the time of Ramesses II. So Menento wasn't too far apart as far as timing is concerned when it came to the ancient records and the King's List. However, here's a source here about the chronology of Menento. It said, even the evidence provided by Menento's history, the various King's Lists, and the many other extant inscriptions which give the names and dates of kings is insufficient to establish an accurate chronology of ancient Egypt. This is because none of these sources provide a complete sequence of kings or gives a full details of the lengths of their reigns. Also, historical inscriptions have not survived from every period, and for some reigns, the surviving evidence is very scanty. Basically, Menetho's chronology is sketchy. So I still didn't have a solid foundation as to where to start at. The only thing I had was my scriptures and my Bible. Like I said, the biblical timeline, and I'll show that to you later on, places the Exodus within 1487 to 1447 BC time frame. So again, Manetho, I couldn't do anything with it, so I was at a dead end, basically. So scratching my head trying to figure out what is going on. What I did find out at that time was that the timeline was messed up, or the timeline was sketchy. So moving right along, I came across and this is during the age of the information age with the explosion of the internet, and I had read so many excerpts on the chronology, especially dealing with Manetho, and then I come across Mr. David Rowe, his book Legend, the Genesis of Civilizations, and this is what he says: a reinvestigation of archaeology and inscription of Egypt's third intermediate period, conventionally dated from 1069 BC to 664 BC, showed that Egyptologists had artificially extended this period beyond its true historical length. As a result, the so-called syncretisms between Egypt and the biblical history in the conventional chronology were shown to be unreliable, more of a matter of wishful thinking than true historical links. So basically, whatever this conventional, however this conventional timeline was established, Egyptologists had artificially extended the dates in the conventional timeline, which would have thrown off any syncretisms between the Bible and Egyptian history. Whether they did that on purpose or whether they did that by accident, I don't know.
I'll say, if I could speak to that for a moment. The conventional timeline and alternative timelines, some people don't understand or they forget. They feel like the King's List that's presented today is so complete, even though experts let you know that we are missing kings out of that, well, pharaohs out of that timeline. So there has to be an alternative time and date in certain places. And I think that certain people overlook that fact when dealing with things that you are presenting or that that Brother Garfield is going to present, and even other and archaeology, the people that dig up stuff and find stuff. I think they overlook that is a fact, and they try to go based off of the Egyptian king list that we all know and love, and they forget that it's not complete. So when people come up with these type of dates, they cannot dismiss this stuff, seeing that their king's list is not right and exact. So I just want to throw that out there.
Exactly, and if we go back to the Manetho slide, that's basically what it was saying. The kings list, you have a series of kings, but then some of it is broken off, the fragments. And it's just due to fair wear and tear or erosion. It happens. But for places where the king list is intact, that's what they use. And there's also other means by which they now do the calculations, like they call it the Sothic or Sothic calculations. That's the rising of the dog star, and certain events happen at this point in time in history. But let's move on. But then in regards to this chronology, I then come across this guy here, Champollion, John Francis Champollion, also known as Champollion Lejeune. was a French scholar, philologist, Orientalist, known primarily as you can see here, decipherer of Egyptian hieroglyphs and a founding figure in the field of Egyptology. Now, I did more research on Champollion and realized I think he's a bit what you would say overrated, because he only went to Egypt once, and at that one time, that is when he deciphered the Rosetta Stone, and this is how he was able to decipher the Egyptian hieroglyphs. So we look here, this is Shoshank the First, also known as Shoshank and Shoshank, or Shoshank the First, was pharaoh of ancient Egypt and the founder of the 22nd dynasty. This is from Wikipedia. And we notice the dates that they give him. He died in 924 BC. He reigned between 943 and 922 BC. Now check this out. If you was to put this beside the biblical timeline, you will fall into the reigns of Solomon and Rehoboam and Jeroboam. So when Champollion went to Egypt and he started to decipher the names of some of these pharaohs in this king's list, and some of these kings lists, and when he also saw the campaigns of Shoshank the First on the walls in the Bubastai, what he then did was say, Shoshank the First, we got Shoshank, and in the Bible we have Shishak. So he made a comparison between the two and equated Shoshank with Shishak. And this is where you get this is how the conventional timeline actually started, with the anchor point of Shoshank being the pharaoh who went into Jerusalem and pillaged the temple and took the shields of gold back to Egypt. Champollion was the one who put Shoshank in there as Shishak, and this is the information that has stuck since Champollion, even up to this day. So what I'm showing you here, the first 3 rows of Shoshank the First campaign located at the Bubastai portal at Karnak, containing the names of several cities in the Levant as all being conquered by Shoshank the First. The arrow is pointing to a name ring, is numbered name ring 29, and it's identified as Yawad, I can't even say it, Yawad Malak. Champollion began to read the city names. So basically what you're looking at are name rings for cities. These are cities that Shoshank the First conquered, and each city that he conquered, and this is actually in a syncretism, like one after the other. You have, let's see, let me go to the next slide. So you have Ajalon, you have Gibeon, Mahanaim, Beth Shan, Shunem, Tanakh, Megiddo. All these names are listed at this place. But when you get to ring number ring name number 29, it reads like I'm showing you here. Then he came to name ring 29 and read the signs Yawad HaMalak, and this is from Pharaohs and Kings by David Rowley, page 121. What he did, he translated this, Champollion's translation, Auda HaMalak, or Judah's kingdom, the kingdom of Judah. This is what he read, and he said, boom, this is it. We got a syncretism. Shoshank is Shishak. That's where we, this is where we got the anchor point for Shoshank being Shishak. However, this man here, Max Muller, Frederick Max Muller's full name, born December the 6th. He was a German scholar of comparative language, religion, and mythology. And this is what he says about that translation. He says, Yad HaMalek, which when translated literally, it literally means hand of the king, and it should be understood as a monument or a stela of the king. So in other words, it's not Judah or kingdom of Judah, it's actually hand of the king. So I had to reject it. I said, you know what? I got to start somewhere. I got to find an answer to how we can find these syncretisms within the archaeological record. If all these people are getting this timeline wrong, what is going on? So if not Shoshank the First, then who? So this is my last slide, and then I'm gonna let Brother Garfield go. Right here is a detail of the Shalem block with the outline of a fortress facade card carved in shallow relief, and down the center vertical column. Basically, what it states is this is the town which the king plundered, and the king mentioned here, the king is actually Ramesses II. So we read in Second Chronicles, it said, so Shishak, king of Egypt, came up against Jerusalem and took away the treasures of the house of the Lord and the treasures of the king's house. He took all, he carried away also the shields of gold, which Solomon had made. This is a pylon that is located in the Ramesseum, and it's accredited to Ramses II. So I'm gonna stop sharing there. That was the last slide. So basically, when I came to my conclusion, and there's a lot more information to this, my conclusion was that, okay, Ramses II has to be Shishak. He has to be the Shishak of the Bible. And the archaeological records demonstrates to me that he did indeed go into Jerusalem, which was then called Shalom. And we have the inscriptions as I showed you in the picture. So that's basically how I came to my conclusion, but there's a lot more to Ramses II as Shishak, but I'll save that for another time.
Okay, sounds good to me, man. I think you provided some real powerful information on that, man. And with your visuals to show people how you came to that conclusion. I feel like that's powerful within itself. We do a lot of talking, and people don't really share their sources and primary and secondary sources. So I think you did a good job of that. And as pertaining to some of the stuff that we're gonna get into later on, hey, it's probably gonna be undeniable from there. Richard Garfield, if you can, man, take yourself off mute, my brother, and start wherever you want to start and present whatever you want to present, my brother. Let's get into this.
Now I'm gonna continue to build on this brother's great presentation. Basically, he gave my introduction as well, if I was to introduce it, and on the same journey he went through from Ramses, then to the New Kingdom. I actually ended up with Moses the Third, and then try to make up some conspiracy theory between Hatshepsut being erased because she was the one that drew Moses out of the water. But like I said, that failed because there's no archaeological evidence of any Israelites in that number leaving during that time period. So like the same thing happened when he ended up looking at Shishak in the Bible. We've concluded that it was of the pharaoh Shoshank, but on the Bubasite portal there's no mention of Israel. Even that translation that was shown, it was shown that it does not mention Israel or Judah at all. So I was looking at the actual account of I'm gonna just share my screen and go to the scriptures. Oh no, someone else is sharing. Oh, here we go. All right, I never did this on my phone. I don't know if any of you guys have I probably can't do this on my phone because it won't maybe share an app.
No, but if you pull up the screen that's in the middle, it should say share screen right there, right in the middle.
Yeah, and it's showing me like certain things. Like in that showing like screen. Here we go. Let me see if that works.
Yeah, I
Can you
say,
see
yeah.
it?
No, I don't see anything. I just see you. Let me see. When you
Okay, here
tap
we
your
go.
screen, yeah, I'm gonna say, do you see the share button? Okay, there you go. There you go. That's it. You got it.
I got it. Okay, cool.
Yes, sir.
I had to
Yes,
get the
sir.
permissions. All right, let's go to the actual biblical narrative for Shishak. And says it came to pass when Rehoboam has established the kingdom and has strengthened himself, he forsook the law of the Lord and all of Israel with him. Now, this time, this is like the divided kingdom. We have Rehoboam ruling the south kingdom. This is Solomon's son. And it came to pass in the 5th year of King Rehoboam, Shishak, king of Egypt, came up against Jerusalem because they had transgressed against the Lord, with 1,200 chariots and 70,000 horsemen, and the people were without number that came with him out of Egypt, the Lubims, the Sukkiims, and the Ethiopians. And he took the fenced cities which pertained to Judah, and came to Jerusalem. Then came Shemaiah the prophet to Rehoboam and to the princes of Judah, that they were gathered together to Jerusalem because of Shishak, and said unto them, Thus saith the Lord, you have forsaken me, and therefore I have also left you in the hand of Shishak. Wherefore the princes of Israel and the king humbled themselves, and they said, The Lord is righteous. And when the Lord saw that they humbled themselves, the word of the Lord came to Shemaiah, saying, They have humbled themselves, therefore I will not destroy them, but I will grant them some deliverance, and my wrath shall not be poured out upon Jerusalem by the hand of Shishak. Nevertheless, they shall be his servants, that they may know my service and the service of the kingdom of the countries. So here you have the account basically saying that God is using an Egyptian pharaoh to bring judgment against Judah. And since they humble themselves, what happened is that you're going to have Judah now being a servant to Egypt. And when you look at the archaeological evidence and the historical narratives of Egypt, you have them ruling over the land of Canaan during a certain time period, especially in the after the New Kingdom, Ramses III and Bernafta. So I was saying to myself, all right, if something like this happened, maybe Egypt spoke about it in some sense. So then we go to what you call the Bernafta Stelle, and this is where we have the first and only mention of Israel. Well, not the only mention of Israel, because we could talk about the amount of letters, but we're gonna go through that today. But it says here, this is like written on stone. Here we go. Israel is laid waste, and the seed is not. So it's like that's a big boast by a king that Israel has been laid waste. And if you look at the biblical narrative, that's how Egypt came against them, like they was about to waste them. So they say that when they wrote this stele right here, it was that the king was over boasting, but in a sense he was speaking about his victory over Israel. So I say, what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna make one choice here, because we know that the Bibles just has every kingdom has a king's list with numbers, and the Bible is no exception. We have the Book of Kings, the Book of Chronicles, that gives us the start of their reign, what age they reigned, and how long they reigned, to the next one. And that's how you're able to build, the time period between kings. And the same thing they do with Egypt. It's not like Egypt, they say like, Ramses existed in the 3rd century. That's our Gregorian dating. So like you always got to find, like I said, like Negative said, that you got to find a reference to plug into, and then work your way from there. We're using the numbers alone. So I said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use Pharaoh Meneptah as Shishak. And the only connection I could find between Meneptah and Shishak is that, Shishak is like a word in Hebrew also that means, greedy of fine linen. So I don't know if that's their way of saying like, this Pharaoh was just greedy. But we're going to start from there. And we know that from in First Kings, what was it? First Kings. Let me get this right here. 11. No, this is talking about Solomon again. We know we're given that Solomon built the temple in the 4th year of his reign. And it says about 400. Can you guys help me with the timing here? If you can pull up the scripture.
Oh, you want me to pull it up?
Here we go. And it came to pass in the 480th year after the children of Israel came out of the land of Egypt, in the 4th year of Solomon's reign, that he began to build the house of the Lord. So we know that basically it's going to be 480 years after the Exodus that Solomon built the temple in the 4th year of his reign. So if you put the Bernafta Stelle as Shoshank, right? That means Bernafta Stelle, that dates to 1208 BC. That you will have Bernafta or Shoshank conquering Judah. So that'll happen in the 4th year of the reign of Solomon's son. So if you come back to 1213 BC, that'll be the 1st year of Rehoboam's reign. So that means that Solomon will have built the temple in 1249 BC, if you're using the dating system. And I'm going with the Septuagint dates, and that's like a whole other conversation for now. But I did find the dating system in the Septuagint a little bit better when it comes to like especially the beginning of Genesis and the time after the flood. So it gave a more logical population growth when it comes to the repopulation of the earth after the flood. But it's not much difference though. It's like a 40-year difference between the year Solomon's reign. So we're not gonna be, way off or nothing like that. So if you basically say Solomon built the temple in 1249 BC, that's gonna bring the Exodus to 689 BC. And that's to just get some backstory. There's this documentary called Patterns of Evidence, and in that documentary, basically they don't tell you or assume who the pharaoh is, but what they show is archaeological evidence of Asiatics living in the land of Egypt, a whole bunch of them. You find a tomb of an Asiatic individual with a multicolored coat. We also find in the graves archaeological evidence of more female Asiatics than male. And when you even go back even further than that time period, into in the end of the Middle Kingdom around there, you find evidence of Asiatics living at peace with the Egyptians. And if you look at the biblical narrative, that's how it starts. There was a peace with the Egyptians in the time of Joseph, where basically you have Egypt and the sons of Israel living in peace in the land, not even only living in peace, but living in a position of authority. And here in this time period, you have an Asiatic individual having a position of authority. But then all of a sudden, there's a shift in the relations between Israel and Egypt, where it says that in the narrative that they rose up a pharaoh who knew not Joseph, right? And then when you look at the graves now, you see evidence of, like I said, more Asiatic females. So if I say what will be a cause of that, all archaeological could tell us they could just make up assumptions like, well, maybe they preferred more Asiatic migrants than males. But if I was to say, all right, if the Exodus is real, right, we should at least find evidence somehow of a reduced male population, because they say they threw the babies in the Nile. And this is what you do find. You do find a reduced male population. And all this occurs in the time period around. Now, when you go to 1689 BC, this brings us into the second intermediate period, or the reign of the 13th and 14th dynasties. Because at this time, it was split into two, where you had the 13th, native dynasties that's in the Upper Egypt or south of Egypt on the map. And then you had some Asiatics rulers ruling in the north. But the 14th and 13th dynasty still had like a peace treaty, because there was an intermarriage between one of their kings and one of the kings from the south. But what we do find also, I'm going to see if I could share. My screen is still on, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh,
Yeah,
not
it
the
is.
shirt.
Let me stop sharing my screen. Hold up, 1 second. Go ahead. There you go.
All right. So this is the 14th dynasty right here. Is it sharing right now?
Nah.
Not right now.
Okay, hold on. Hold on.
There you go.
All right. During the second, this is the talking about the 14th dynasty. During the second half of the dynasty, several kings included the words nourishment and provisions into their throne names, and this seems to indicate that food may have become a very important political factor. There's also a drastic increase in burials at this time, with several tombs functioning as mass graves. This suggests that the latter half of the 14th dynasty was ravaged by famine and plagues. The rapid succession of kings at this time showed that even the most powerful could not be protected from illness. The short reigns also disestablished and weakened the central authority of the 14th dynasty, making it no match for the invading troops of a foreign people known as the Hyksos, who rapidly conquered Avaris and brought the 14th dynasty to an end. And also, when he talks about the 13th dynasty, he says the same thing with them because remember they rule together, weakened by internal power struggles, famine, and plagues, right? So when I look at what happened in what's that 1689 BC, you could choose either the 13th or the 14th dynasty, but the reason I chose the 14th dynasty was because it says in the narrative that they built the city P. Ramses in Exodus, which what led many people to assume it was Ramses. But we know that in Genesis, let me say Genesis. I'll look for it right now.
While he's looking that up, as y'all can see, man, these brothers are presenting reasonable and logical information. I've seen people debate the Exodus against believers, and I rarely see anybody address the information at hand. They would just go to somebody who they feel like does not believe in the Bible, and they would just take their arguments and run with it. I rarely see anybody addressing the information presented in front of them. And Richard Garfield, you had a conversation with a brother, as we all know, on this channel, and he even admitted to saying that, well, hey, I wasn't addressing you, I was presenting what I presented. And from the brother himself, I've seen him have that debate or discussion over the years with at least 2 to 3 people. It was the exact same PowerPoint. It's like your information that you presented was not getting addressed. And even admittedly so, the person admitted to not addressing what you said. So that would go with what I just said a while ago. I see people who argue for the Exodus being a real event, even people who have PhDs in this area that neither of us on this platform have yet. And again, I just rarely see people addressing the information. So I just want to say that. Go ahead, my brother.
Yep. Genesis 47:11. It says Joseph placed his father and his brethren and gave them a possession in the land of Egypt, in the best of the land, in the land of Ramses, as Pharaoh has commanded. So when you look at it there, right, it mentions the lands of Ramses, right? But when you go to Exodus, it says that they built the cities of P. Ramses, right? So how can Ramses exist at the time of Joseph if they didn't build it till Exodus? What that means is that when the biblical authors finally compiled the Genesis version we have, because we know that the Genesis was written by, from the original text by scribes, and they put everything together because they even reference books that's mentioned in the Bible that we don't have. So what this shows is that this was written at a time where Israel was prosperous, and probably in the time of the kingdom of Israel, when during the time of David, Solomon. So at that time period, Ramses did exist. So I made an example, like say like if I had ancestors, which I don't because I have ancestors in this country, but just for example's sake, I have ancestors that lived in New York when it was called New Amsterdam, right? And they was building up New Amsterdam. But today, in this day and age, I say, my ancestors built New York. Basically, I'm saying this, I'm speaking the truth, but I'm referring it to what I know it as in the day. So what this proves is that this Bible was written, especially this version was written at the time that we could put it back and date this the scrolls we have back to the times of Ramses.
That's powerful.
So that, because you think there's this logic right there. Like, why would verse 11 mention Ramses if they didn't build Ramses yet? This was basically supposed to be written at the time it happened.
Right.
We know that it couldn't, that wasn't written like that. We know that Moses wrote the original law, and then we basically, the scribes took that and wrote what the Bible we have today. Because when Moses died, it wasn't like Moses got up, wrote that he died, and went back in the grave. Like, nah. So that's why there's no reason for us to put the Exodus in the times of Ramses. So, like, going back to, like, the 1689 as the date of Exodus, why did I choose the 14th dynasty, which would be the northern, or this lower Egypt, which is North Egypt? Because since they mentioned they built the city of P. Ramses, we know before that it was called Avaris.
Mm-hmm.
And we have evidence of them living there. Many Asiatics living in Avaris, even the tomb of the Asiatic individual who we basically proposing as Joseph. So when it comes to when the biblical narrative says, then arose a Pharaoh that knew not Joseph. So I said to myself, all right, let's kind of go back to the time of Joseph, right?
Mm-hmm.
These are slides. This is not the slides. There you go. Can you see the screen?
Yes,
Yes.
sir.
Yeah. Here you have the Kumenhotep II mural, right? And he basically, Kumenhotep was like a priest that was a contemporary of pharaohs.
Sensacerate.
Sensacerate.
Yeah.
Yep.
And a Menehet.
Yep. Sensacerate the third, and yep. So when you look at the mural, I don't know if you guys can see it, right? Here you have a group of Asiatic individuals, multicolored, wardrobe. And here you have a man right here. His name is
Abishai,
the Hyksos. And the reason why the word the Hyksos, like anytime we hear that word, we automatically assume it's talking about, like, the 15th dynasty conquerors that came in. But that's just basically an Egyptian term to mean ruler of a foreign land, because there's even some instances where they even call the Nubians, like in an instance, Hyksos. So when you look at this word Abishai, I have mentioned that this word is found in the Hebrew Bible.
Mm-hmm.
So this is basically a Hebrew name. But when you look at, like, this whole procession, these Jews are coming to our funeral of Kumenhotep. Now we all know, right? If you go to a funeral, or if you had a funeral, the only people that's going to be at your funeral are people that you care about, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this shows that we have Asiatics living in a peaceful and loving relationship with the Egyptians. And when you look at the story, the narrative of Joseph being in Egypt, that's what it looked like. He married an Egyptian woman. So when you look at this, the evidence of, like, all right, now let's go back now to a Pharaoh who knew not Joseph. So we know that this dynasty, and then that was I believe the 12th dynasty. Then we get to the 13th dynasty. Those are kind of like the native dynasties that belong to each other. But the 14th dynasty was a foreign dynasty from the Asiatic lands. Now, anytime we think about the word Canaanite or Asiatics, like my ancestors from the Caribbean. So if you used to say the people from the Caribbean, right? You're automatically going to assume that every culture in the Caribbean is the same. So the same thing when we say, like, Canaanite or Asiatic, we think that every Asiatic or Canaanite in that land is the same. Like, they don't have distinct cultures. Like, I know the difference between a Jamaican and a Trinidadian. To people outside of us, they may look at us the same, but internally we see the differences. So when you have this 14th dynasty foreign rulers coming in now, in my logic, it makes sense to say that now that we have something where it says you have a Pharaoh which knew not Joseph. Because how could the native dynasties forget such a powerful or known individual that took them out of famine? And I want to end it right there. There's so much other evidence I could go into, during the time of Joseph, which the Pharaoh was, that we have letters of a supposed famine that was supposed to happen. It's called the Hekenat, I probably said it wrong, letters and tomb biographies of Amene, which talk about like a supposed famine coming in, and this happened during the reign of, what do I got right here? It was in the 12th Sensuret the First. Yeah, Sensuret the First.
Ooh. I love it. I love it. Was you done, brother?
Oh yeah. I thought you were gonna chime in there and just build on.
Y'all just flow, bro. Yeah. Y'all build, bro. Yeah, y'all
okay.
build.
Okay. So while I was listening to the debate with you, Brother Garfield and MVP, I was like pulling my hair out because I was like, oh, well, I ain't got no hair up right now, but I was just like, oh, I wish I could be there and jump in. But let me pause. I'm gonna share something with you real quick. Share screen. Let's see. Don't pay it going against the grain. But so basically, like I was saying earlier, right? The Bible has a biblical timeline, and this is it right here. This is how we calculate, or this is how I use the biblical timeline to calculate the age of the earth. And as you can see, you have Adam all the way down to Abraham. Abraham was born at least 2008 years after creation. And so my tactic then was to we know from these calculations and from other calculations, the way that we calculate it is we go from Adam all the way up to Jesus, which gives us roughly about 4,000 years. So when we subtract the year, let's say 2008, from the year Abraham was born, that would give us roughly, I think, like 1992 BC. So moving ahead, I was like, okay, you said, now you brought up the Septuagint, and I understand what you're saying about the length, not the length, but the population growth after the flood, which would make sense as to how you have all these people at the Tower of Babel. But for me, I still stick with the Mesoreg text. I can use either or for several other purposes, but in this instance, I don't really need the Septuagint because I can just go to Galatians 3 and read this. And this, I say that the covenant that was confirmed before of God in Christ, the law, which was 430 years after, cannot disannul, that it should make the promises of non-effect. In other words, you know how you have these BHIs, is, oh, you got to follow the law, this and that. Basically, what Paul was stating is that Abraham received the promises before 430 years before Moses received the 10 Commandments. So if I was to do the math, it's some other math that you have to do. Abraham was what, 70? I think he was 70 years old, somewhere in that time frame when he first got the promises. So you just do the math, and I think you subtract the 430 years to when they received the law, which landed me, like I said, at 1487 BC for the Exodus, or conveniently for some is 1447 BC for the Exodus. Either one is I'm fine with. However, what I did was created this spreadsheet based off of the conventional timeline and the conventional chronology for Egypt and Israel. So looking at this spreadsheet, we see here the patriarchic period. That's Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, around that time frame. For some reason, the conventional timeline has them coming in during the Middle Kingdom. And I'm not talking about the time when Joseph came in. I'm talking about like early on, before the 12 tribes or the 12 children of Israel had been conceived or had been born. This conventional timeline is it throws the biblical syncretisms off. So what I did was I looked at the revised chronology that was created by David Rowe. And as you can see here, I started with Joseph arriving in Egypt. And guess what, bro? You said 12th dynasty. That's why I have Joseph coming in at the end, or maybe somewhere right at the end of the 12th dynasty. Well, bro, let's look at this for a second. You was just saying that during that time, and this is information that I didn't even have, but let's see how it corroborates. There's a famine. Was there not a famine prophesied by a dream given to the Pharaoh stating that, well, it didn't say it, but he had to get Joseph to interpret the dream for him. But it's supposed to be 7 years of plenty. And what else? 7 years of famine. If we look at the revised chronology, we have Joseph coming in around 1682 BC. The Egyptian chronology also links up here with Amenemhat III at the end, or right at the end of the 12th dynasty BC. But check this out. On the north, and I had these in my notes for a while. And I'm gonna show you something. Y'all might fall out y'all seat when y'all see this, but it's the same mural that you had, Garfield. Just a little more information with it. On the north interior wall of Kunhotep's Grand Chapel is painted a well-known scene of Asiatics entering Egypt, carrying packs of eye paint, coal, to sell to the Egyptians. The short text accompanying the scene informs us that there are 37 persons in all, men, women, and children, and that leader of the group is named the chief of the hill country, Heka Kaset Abishai. I ain't gonna go into the hieroglyphic. All I'm gonna say, if you look by his name, you'll see what looks like 3 humps. It's just saying that he's a foreigner. He's come from the hill country. But anyways, like you said, yes, it is a good biblical Hebrew name, Abishai. And the translation, the name Abishai is found 24 times in the Bible: 1 Samuel, 2 Samuel, and 1 Chronicles. From Strong's H52, the name Abishai, the phonetic spelling, as you can see here, but the interpretation or the transliteration of the name, my father is Jesse, or my father is a gift. But look at here, bro. Do you see what I see? Can you see this? Anybody there?
Yeah.
If on this wall here, there's somebody tied up. All right. So we read in Genesis 37:28. Then there passed Midianites, merchantmen, and they drew and lifted up Joseph out of the pit and sold Joseph to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver, and they brought Joseph into Egypt. The conventional chronology under 1986, 1759 BC would place this event far too early in the later stages of the 13th and 14th dynastic period, and way too early on the timeline. There are also 2 other problems. Number one, they stopped making these types of tombs during the end of the 12th dynasty. Number 2, there are no more syncretisms found between the Bible and archaeological records if we go with the conventional scheme. But under the revised chronology, 1682 BC, we have a good historical setting. And basically all I'm saying here is that no, this is not, this scene right here happens a little time before Joseph comes into Egypt. But what it shows us is that they were not ashamed, or they had no problems bringing, makeup, food, animals, gazelle, things of that nature, and human prisoners and people. So what the Bible says in Genesis 37 has historical relevance to what we see written on the walls in Egypt. I'm not saying that these are the Hebrews, but in actuality, they are Hebrews if they are indeed Midianites and Ishmaelites, because Abraham had a son through one of his concubines or maidservants, and his name was Midian. And the custom of wearing colorful coats, we see it right here. But again, we see somebody tied up and being brought to the gravesite of Hotep. And now I get into these type of tombs, these mastabas that were built for these priests who were controlling these the 42 nomes, what they call in Egypt. Hotep, he was more like a governor. And so, but shortly after this scene, this is probably the last type of tomb to be built in this fashion. Well, what happened when Joseph got into Egypt? He was put in prison. He was falsely accused of sexual harassment. And then all of a sudden he interpreted the Pharaoh's dream. And the next thing you know, Pharaoh put him in charge. Well, what do you know about this? The government of Egypt, of the 12th dynasty, those 42 nomes, those priests who controlled those nomes, guess what? All that power they had was centralized to the Pharaoh himself. Can this be a coincidence? This can't be a coincidence. Let's see. Something else that I wanted to point out. During this time, so throughout the history of ancient Egypt, the annual inundation of the Nile River was relied upon to fertilize the land surrounding it. This was essential for agriculture and food production. There's evidence that the collapse of the previous Old Kingdom, and this was during the first intermediate period, had been due in part to a low flood levels and resulting in famine. This is all from Wikipedia. This trend appears to have been reversed during the early years of the Middle Kingdom, with relatively high water levels recorded for much of this era, with an average of inundation of 19 meters above its non-flood levels. Now watch this. The years of repeated high inundation levels corresponded to the most prosperous period of the Middle Kingdom, which occurred during the reign of who? Amenemhat III. If Joseph goes into Egypt during the 12th dynasty and interprets the dream of the Pharaoh, who sees water cows coming out, 7 water cows coming out of the river, and the river basically will be the Nile, coming out of the river, and then 7 more skinny looking water cows or hippos coming out, devouring the 7, but they still retain their I guess sickly fashion, representing the famine that was going to come. So the 7 good cows, 7 good years, the 7 bad cows, 7 bad years of famine. But it seems here that this freaking Pharaoh was really concerned about the levels of the flood. Here I got hieroglyphic inscription on the Barku shrine of Senseret the First at the Karnak, indicating a good inundation. This is just them recording the flood levels. It came to pass at the end of 2 full years that Pharaoh dreamed, and behold, he stood by the river. I ain't gonna go into all of that, but just wanted to point out the fact that this, now I ain't gonna say this Pharaoh, but the Pharaoh of that time when Joseph came in, he had this dream, and it can't be a coincidence that the pharaohs of the 12th dynasty were very concerned about the flood levels of the Nile. Here it is again. Pharaoh said to Joseph, for as much as God have showed thee all this, there is none so discreet and wise as thou art. Thou shalt be over my house, and according to thy word shall all my people be ruled. Only in the throne will I be greater than you. So I just wanted to share that little bit with y'all, just to correspond with Brother Garfield was saying. Although we may not agree on as far as the timing is concerned, but there is so much archaeological evidence that synchronizes with what the Bible says, if that makes sense.
No, that made total sense to me, bro. Like, yeah, a lot of that made sense. Go ahead, Rich.
No, that was deep. What he showed on that Bernafta Stelle, how he zoomed in on there. Yeah, that was deep right there. I mean, like, what, you know, whether like the timing, we also understand too that when it comes to dating these things, we are going on dates that even at times where even when it comes to Amenhotep II and Senusret the First, you have different historians disagreeing on the timing, where sometimes it would be like some, you know, the 50 years off at times. So, but what we did come to the conclusion though was that we did came in the same time period, and that's still amazing that all this evidence that matches the narrative exists in the time periods, but that we're going by having a reference and going back by the biblical dates. And I could even go, you know, I'll make this one more point too, something else that just shows you like how even our brother here, Negati, like he just would look for evidence in the time period and it will just pop up. So even if we go back, because we know that we have all the years between Joseph and between Abraham, we know the exact time and the exact length of time between these two individuals. So if you go by the date, go by the biblical dating, starting from 1208 BC all the way back, it brings Abraham to basically, what was that, when he was 75 years old to 2119 BC. And when I looked at the pharaoh of this period, it was Entef II. And when you look at the narrative, it says there was a famine in the land. Abraham went down into Egypt to sojourn there, but the famine was grievous in the land. That's Genesis 12:10. Here we have the Hyperstar Stelle, which is in Entef II's reign, that mentions a famine that occurred during his reign. So it's just amazing how when you just know the Bible is correct and you start to plug it into reality, you're never going to turn up, with a sour face.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, man. So that's all I got. That's all else I got to say. Like, there's so much stuff I could share, but I don't want to do it injustice by not having the right power slides to show people the exact things I'm mentioning. But yeah, this is powerful stuff, man. This is powerful stuff.
Yeah.
For those who don't want to believe,
Yeah. It was one other thing that I wanted to cover. And it was the Bernafta Stelle. So the Bernafta Stelle, when you think about who Bernafta is, Bernafta was.
Let me know before you show your screen, bro. If you think so. I said, let me know if you're about to show your screen.
Okay. The Bernafta Stelle basically. Let me pull it up. I'm gonna go ahead and share it. I'm gonna go ahead and share. You cannot start. Oh.
Go ahead. It should let you know.
Okay. And I just pulled this up out of my notes. I heard MVP say that it means Ra is happy. See, the thing about this Bernafta Stelle is that it records the campaigns of Seti the First, Ramses, and Ramses the Second. What I didn't find is any campaigns that Bernafta did himself. It was more so him just ragging on what his father and grandfather had done, and basically saying, well, see, look at what my dynasty has done. But as you can see here, is a breakdown of Israel is laid waste, his seed is no more. Now, in the conventional scheme of things, and I'm gonna go back to it real quick. Let me go find it.
So you're saying that the Bernafta Stelle, like that, basically, he's talking about what his ancestors did, and you said what would that would be Seti?
Yeah, Seti. I think Seti the first. Then you got Ramses the second, and I believe Marentar is Ramses' son.
He's Ramses the third son, so that's like a little bit down more.
Will he be Ramses the third son? Because I have him as Ramses the second son. Because
I mean the second. I mean Ramses the Great, which is Ramses the second, right?
yes.
Yeah. Ramses the second. My fault. You're right.
Okay. All right. So looking at the New Kingdom, and right here you see wandering. This is right after slavery. During the New Kingdom time period, on the conventional scheme, the children of Israel are basically rampaging through Canaan and taking the land as God had instructed them, all while Seti, Ramses, and all them are situated in power. But the problem is, how can you have, and I think this is what old boy asked, how can you have Israel in Canaan at this point in time if, as you see right here, they just came out of Egypt as slaves and they're just wandering around in Canaan? They are not even recognized as an empire right after they came out of Egypt, because they were still trying to gather the land that God had promised them. But again, if we look at the revised chronology, look at what we have here. King Saul, Solomon, then you got Shishak and Rehoboam. And if you look to the left here under the 19th dynasty, who do we run into? Seti, Ramses II, Marentar. So if Marentar created a stela and said that Israel, after he names all these other cities, all these other kingdoms, all these other empires, and then he gets all the way to Israel is laid waste, how in the world why in the world in the middle of him talking about, oh, I done conquered Washington, D.C., I done conquered Maryland, I done conquered Virginia, I done conquered North Carolina, Ra is blessed, Ra is happy. And then he goes on to name even more, like, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. And the reason why it doesn't make sense is because it's inconsistent with what the Stella is trying to present. Now, let me go to something else. Let me go to my other slide here that I just pulled up. And I'm going to show you something here. Can y'all see that? Can y'all see that?
Yep.
Okay. So on the merit, this is the Hyperstar Hall of Karnak. And forgive my memeology or whatever, but this is something that I created to help me understand what I was looking at. On the Marentar Stella, you have Libya, Hatti, the Hittites, Canaan, on these walls right here. These are all the countries or kingdoms that Seti destroyed. Then you go up to number 3, Canaan. Then come over here to this area, Ashelon, Yanom, and this is where Israel would be located, on this wall over here. This long wall right here. This is where Israel should be located. So basically, the Marentar Stella is reflecting on all these campaigns that are written on these walls here. And Marentar, he's just like, yep, this is what my father and my grandfather has done. And I think that's why some people would say Marentar was like over exaggerating, but I hadn't seen any campaigns of him myself. But in the conventional scheme, it doesn't make sense, because Israel would have just came out of Egypt as free. They wouldn't have been seen as a kingdom or anything like that. But if we go back to the revised timeline, we go back to the revised chronology, now it makes sense. We have Ramesses, who I believe is Shishak, conquering, or not conquering, but pillaging Israel, and especially in Judah. He goes into Judah and he ransacks the temple. It was something else that I had, and I wish I can find it. But if you go to the Raza, I'm gonna find it for you. Give me a second.
Okay. So based off of everything that's been presented so far, like who would y'all say? I know you said Shoshank, which some would call Ramsey the second or third. Which one? Second?
Yeah, the second.
The second. Would you agree with that, Richie, too?
What's that?
That the Pharaoh who would have been the Pharaoh at the time of the Exodus would have to be Ramsey the second.
Oh, no. I'm not saying that.
Oh, my bad. What are you saying, Jerry? I mean, could be Ramsey the second.
Nah, he way.
No.
What, am I missing something? What was you saying, Jerry, though?
Basically, what I was saying about Marintar and Ramses, because they are within the same time frame. Okay. Israel would have had to be considered an empire or kingdom during the time of Ramses.
Right.
Yep.
If we have Marintar calling Israel out for being conquered.
That's a good point right there. That's a good point.
So
you hear what he's saying? Yeah, we say for Egypt to like he's saying, for Egypt to mention Israel on their walls, you have to have been a popping place,
right,
to be put on the wall. You know what I'm saying? That's deep right there. That's deep right there.
So who would y'all say the Pharaoh could have been during that time? Is what I was trying to say.
Well, basically,
go on.
Okay, I'm sorry. Let me. I'm gonna share the screen again. I'm gonna show you.
During the time of the Exodus.
I think I found what I was looking for, but hold on.
My bad. Yeah. I wasn't trying to misrepresent you. My bad. I probably just heard it wrong. My bad.
Oh no, you good. Oh yes, I found it.
So y'all was saying again, just to reiterate, Ramses II would have been he would have been the Pharaoh who wrote about Egypt, and they would have already had to be a nation by that time, seeing that they had already wrote about.
Yeah, and here's what me and Negati is agreeing on. What we're doing, we're taking the Bernafta Stelle, right? And we're placing that. Yeah, and we're placing that to we're taking the biblical event and plugging that into the events of the Stele. Okay. And what he's saying is that the Stele was written about written about Seti and Ramses the First, I believe you said, right? And my premise is that, okay, I'm not gonna say that. I'm just gonna, if they're saying Bernafta wrote this on his campaigns, I'm plugging Bernafta as a pharaoh. But to Negati's point too, like he brought up some good, conjecture to saying that, that Bernafta, and we know that people do that, like, they'll take accomplishment of someone else, and like, especially if you're coming from that line, that's your grandfather, that's your father, like, it's not, unfair to say that, okay, yeah, he's taking credit for one of his ancestors, his grandfather, something's accomplishments. Right. But what we're agreeing on, I just want to get to the audience out there, is that we're plugging the biblical event of Shishak in the narrative into the Bernafta Stele events.
Okay.
I don't know if you agree with me on that.
Say that one more time.
Now, basically, we're agreeing on the events of the Bernafta Stele, and we're plugging that event into the biblical narrative of Shishak.
Yes.
Yeah,
because it basically like I said earlier, and he wouldn't have, if Israel was running around trying to conquer land and all the other stuff, they wouldn't have been recognized as a people like that. They would have had to been situated, settled down, had a king. And the crazy part about it, I just found it. I just pulled it up. I'm gonna share this real quick.
Go ahead.
All right. Let's see. Next one, please come up. Okay, I don't know what's going on. Why is it doing this? Okay, hold on, let me see. Well, it'll come up soon, but
you're talking while it's on there. That's fine. You can have it on there while it's coming up.
okay. Let me go back to it then.
Just to have
there it is. All right, so this is from the book Pharaohs and Kings of Biblical Quests, and I got two pictures. What you see here, see the city on the hill, which may represent Jerusalem, depicted on the south wall of the great hall of Abu Simbel temple. In the valley beneath the city of herdsmen flees in terror. At the gate of the fortress, two citizens plead for mercy. Atop of rampart, the ruler of the city offers Ramses an incense burner as a peace offering, and behind him is a high-ranking woman who holds a child. This is a I was saying to myself, I said, bro, if this is the temple, if this is the temple on the wall of Ramesses, then there's no doubt that he was Shishak. If you recall the was it Ashurbanipal and the Jehu Stela on the Black Obelisk? Do you remember seeing that?
Yeah.
Where he has Jehu in the same position, bowing down his head to the king who's coming in to conquer Jerusalem.
Okay.
If you look, if you can see, hold on, let me pull it up a little better. Can y'all see this?
Yeah.
This looks like the temple. This is located inside of the Ramesseum. And what I did, since I can't travel to Egypt, I use Google Earth. And I tried to get pictures. Well, I tried to download pictures of someone else's pictures who was inside of there. And the only part they got was this part on the side. But this is from David Rowe's book. And he had access and he took a picture, and this is what he saw. This right here looks like a temple, the temple in Jerusalem. And if Shishak, as we say, Shishak went into Jerusalem and plundered it, and then we know they love to brag about what they do and they put it on the wall.
Mm-hmm.
What else can this be? What else can it be? So to answer your question, Jacobus, I'm gonna share one more time. I'm gonna go back to my other presentation.
It's Jacobus, but you can just call me nobody. You already know that.
Okay, my bad.
Oh no, it's all love.
I'm gonna go back.
I almost slipped up and called you by that one time too.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's because y'all know me for real. That's why a lot of people don't know that. Yeah, you just call me nobody.
So if you look at this timeline I got here, if you look at the Exodus on the right side, 1447 BC, and on the revised chronology for Egypt, you will see Dynasty the First and or second or both as who I believe was the pharaoh of the Exodus. And again, if you go further down, you see where it says the Hyksos invasion of Egypt. Well, think about it. We always talk about the Emperor Papyrus. I could bring that up too, but it's going to take time for me to do that. But the Emperor Papyrus basically talks about all the things that happened. Well, some Egyptologists feel like Emperor was talking about the first intermediate period and that if the Pharaoh, whoever the Pharaoh was at that time, it was written, don't straighten his act up, well, guess what? He's going to end up going through a time of chaos, and he poetically spells out all the things that could happen, but in reality, they understand that this was written, and they as Egyptologists are, they're always confused as to maybe it was written during the 13th dynasty, or maybe it was written during the 16th dynasty.
You know what's crazy about that too? I have a point to add to that. The manuscript we have of it is from the New Kingdom, right? And if you look at the narrative of the Apparel of Paris, it says that because of all the famine in the land, invaders came and conquered the land, like foreign invaders.
Yep.
And when you look at when we're placing back the Exodus now into the second intermediate period, between the 14 and 13 dynasties, famine weakened those dynasties, which caused another foreign nation to come from that land and conquer all of Egypt. So that's why I mentioned that point to the whole saying, like, when you think of people from the Caribbean, you think them all the same. Like we to think Canaan, that the land of Canaan was united front is off. There was many different kingdoms within that land. So the Apparel Paris, if you place it back into the events of the 14 and 13 dynasty, it matches perfectly. And this is where the Exodus land too. So what the Bible is saying is that here is the God behind the events that's making these things happen.
I like that. Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. And from all the things that I've observed, it makes sense that to me, it's like when the Exodus happened, it left Egypt in a very weakened state. And and they say, like, a lot of Egyptologists like to say, hey, the Hyksos, they didn't come in with they didn't come in with a war banner and all this other stuff. They took power subvertly, like they usurped power, because if you look at the Hyksos who was coming in during the 12th dynasty, they allowed all these Asiatics to come in, and then they somehow took power from the Egyptians during the Hyksos time.
And that's why I mentioned that whole thing. When you think about the Caribbean, you think all Caribbean people are the same, not knowing they're different islands, different cultures. The same thing when it comes to Asiatics, to say, okay, if you're labeled Asiatic, you must be the same like all Asiatics. Like, nah, we don't have to be that way. We should know that from looking at the world today. But we look at the world so differently back then. Like, oh, there's something new under the sun. There's nothing new under the sun. Like the way we act today, the only thing that makes us different is technology. But people were still doing the same thing. They were still talking the same conversations we having back in the day too. You know what I'm saying? Like the people think, that people were just stupid back then. But if you look at how they built these temples and these big columns without the technology we have, they still got it up there. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's facts.
But what's crazy? Like, I want to just talk to the audience real quick when you listen to this. First, to the Christian audience, that what me and Negative is saying is that stop looking in the New Kingdom for the Exodus, and you could be bold to say that the Exodus is correct. It's a historical document. You don't have to change up nothing. And to the non-Christian audience, this is why, like, I don't really change up Bernafta Stelle to Bernafta. Not to say that I disagree with what you're saying. Is that we're already, in a sense, taking a big chunk of time from the timeline to fit the Bible in and to make it make sense. And people kind of like hate when Christians do that, because they're saying, you're just changing history because you want to make your Bible make sense. But I'm going to make a case for the third intermediate period. What we've done, being Negative, we haven't changed no history of Egypt. We haven't said nothing that this is what Egypt really means. When we plugged in our reference, we went back in time, everything just plugged in by itself. But the only thing we're really saying is that, okay, this third intermediate period has to be shortened. But let me give you some logic to that. The first intermediate period of Egypt, right? The first and second lasted about 100 years, right? The third intermediate period is 405 years. So when you look at the first intermediate and second intermediate period, you have a kingdom, you have some internal struggles, a famine happened, then like they got their power back together, and it's still the same Egypt that looks like the previous Egypt. You know what I'm saying? Not like it's like a total change. Same thing happened with the second intermediate period. But in the third intermediate period, you have all this time, 400 and something years for Egypt to get it together, and then it came back again. And there's another thing too. We're not just trying to we're not trying to fix biblical history. We're also fixing Greek history. I'm going to explain that to you. Because of the third intermediate period being so long, 405 years, we have what you call the Greek Dark Ages. So this is what they're saying, that the Greek after the Bronze Age collapse went dumb, illiterate for 400 and something years. And this was an empire that was, back in, the time of Ramses II, Solomon was balling. Everybody was good until the Bronze Age collapse. And to say that the Greeks went dumb for 400 years and then came back and figured out the Earth was round, it's like, like what are you really saying? So here's another thing too. The Odyssey of Homer was written, with the timeline we have now, with the 415 years, is written 400 years after the events that it's talking about, which I believe was the war. I'm not going to say Peloponnesian War. Was it that war? But there was some Greeks war.
I think you're talking about the what was it? The Trojan War?
Yeah, it was talking about the war the Greeks had. And when you look at when it was written, his book, it was written 400 years after the events. But when you reduce the third intermediate period, now you have the Odyssey of Homer being written 100 years after the events.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So you're not only just fixing, the biblical history, you're also fixing Greek history. Because if you think about it, you're not losing nothing by reducing the intermediate periods, because what the intermediate periods means is that I don't know. I'm just gonna guess. That's what it basically means, because there's so much internal struggle going on. Is that kings are going up, kings are dropping. We don't have no evidence of this king, so you gotta make a big guess. You know what I'm saying, for certain things. And for the first and the second intermediate period, because we had the Turin's king list, they was able to make better estimates. But with this third intermediate period, they had nothing to really go on. They had to go by a lot of conjecture.
Yeah, exactly. Like on the slide with Menento, what was said on there, in some instances, it's like it doesn't show, like some kings, especially during the third intermediate period, like in the later dynastic periods, you have some dynasties that were contemporary with each other, which is why the timeline should be shortened on that aspect. And I 100% agree with you on the shortening, or actually the Trojan Wars that happened, and 100 years pass, and then Homer writes about the events. So I mean, it makes sense, and the reason why is because most of history hinges upon Egyptians' history. And the crazy part to me is that it was the Bible that led Champollion to make his decision as to when to set this anchor mark for Shishak. But then they turn around and use the same, I guess, information to disprove the Bible. Don't make sense. So when we having these discussions with these people, and they bring up, oh well, that makes sense because at this point in time, this is what was happening, blah blah blah, and then you ask them, well, where did you get the conventional timeline from? Well, I'm here to tell you, they got it from Champollion, who looked at Shoshank as Shishak. And that is the standard from then all the way up to now.
Mm-hmm.
And my thing is this. And I'm gonna leave it with y'all.
We can get ready to close up, but don't say that. Gonna say that.
The reason why this is so important, especially for us as believers, is because within the Exodus, we have something called the Passover. And the Passover, if the Exodus didn't happen, then that means that the Passover didn't happen. And if you understand this, the significance of the Passover, as everything in the Old Testament, my thing is everything points to Jesus Christ. So if the Exodus didn't happen, that means that the Passover didn't happen, which means that anything after that in the scriptures didn't happen. So that's why this subject is so important. And they would call our faith, our faith would be in vain. But we have all the information that we need, and it's solid. I would say it's solid. It's not 100% because all the information out there, you have to sort through it. You have to do your research. You have to research the research and things of that nature. But I promise you, that Bible is 100% accurate.
I'm telling you.
It's 100% accurate because that Passover points to Jesus Christ. The blood on the door was a type and shadow of the blood of Jesus Christ on our heart and to cover us, to cover our sins. So again, the Exodus happened, is written in the scriptures to teach us of the things to come. In I think it's in Galatians, it says that, you know, those things that happened were an example to teach us. And that's what it is. That's what it boils down to. This Exodus teaches us that the blood of Jesus Christ covers our sins and saves us from the judgment of God. And that's what it really boils down to, Jesus Christ.
Okay. Were those your final words, bro?
Yes, sir.
Brother Richie Garfield, I want you to make your final statement and give your closing words, my brother.
Yeah, man. Okay, outside for me, I have no interest, and this I'm speaking to the conscious community.
Right.
I have no interest into proving Jewish history. Like for all it's worth, me proving the Exodus, what that have to do with me? But to what Negative was saying, the reason why I proved the Exodus is because Jesus believed in the Exodus. You gotta understand, like Christians, we love the Messiah. And when it comes to like our standard of living, it doesn't matter what else we're hearing around us. We're looking at this figure, and it's him that we trust because everybody out there wilding out. I don't care which king you want to follow. You know what I'm saying? We find a strong foundation in this tower right here that we're looking at. So this is why, I find interest into proving the Exodus because he believed in the Exodus. And to what was heard tonight, what we just provided was the framework to see that we're not making nothing pseudo. We didn't make nothing pseudo up when it came to the known timelines. We're just saying, is there another reason why you don't believe? Because we gave plenty of reasons to believe tonight.
Right, and I totally agree with that, man. As y'all can see, speaking to the conscious community, they like to say that, Christians don't study and, we don't believe in this, we don't believe in that, or, we just try to make stuff up to fit into the Bible, man. As y'all can see, these two brothers tonight came on the show and showed you that that is a flat out lie. So anybody that you hear teaching those type of things, man, that, Christian brothers are not on their stuff, that they don't want to know, that they just accept any and everything just because, people have blind faith and that they have no reason to believe in what they believe in. Y'all can just start tuning off those channels, man. Y'all should unsubscribe to all those channels. You may not be a believer, but it's a different thing to listen to people who lie about people who do believe. We as Christians, we don't take what y'all say as a lie. You know, we try to address the arguments that you're making. We try to look up sources and, you know, figure out things as pertaining to the arguments that you're making. And all we ask is that y'all give us that same respect, because ain't none of us out here sitting on stupid, and ain't none of us dumb. And like the good point that Richie Garfield made earlier, that people like to look at the ancient world and just think that these people were just idiots or stupid. No, the only thing that has changed from then to now is technology, man. People thought about the same stuff. They went about their day doing the same stuff, trying to figure out the same stuff and all that. So that's one thing that people should really just stop believing that it was like that, you know. So all in all, man, I just want to let y'all know that that is Richie Garfield. That is my brother Najipsy Hawkins. I am nobody, always trying to tell everybody about somebody who can save anybody, and that is Jesus the Christ. This has been Paradigm Shift TV 314. And man, we hope that y'all enjoyed this show. We hope that y'all learned something from this show. And we look forward to y'all tuning in to the next show, man. And we appreciate y'all, and that's peace.